My ex demanded I pay for his wedding, so I showed his fiancée the truth. Imagine getting a text from your ex-boyfriend demanding you pay for his wedding to another woman. Not asking, demanding, like it was your responsibility, your duty to fund the happiest day of his life with someone else. Most people would block the number and move on, but I did something better. I decided to give him exactly what he deserved, and let me tell you, what happened next was absolutely priceless. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd found the love of my life. His name was Marcus, and he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, ambitious, and always knew exactly what to say to make me feel special. We dated for 4 years, and during that time, I supported him through everything. When he wanted to start his business, I invested my savings. When he needed a place to stay after his lease ended, I let him move into my apartment rent-free. When his car broke down, I co-signed a loan so he could get a new one. I thought we were building a future together, that all these sacrifices were investments in our shared life. Looking back now, I realize I was just his personal ATM with benefits. The breakup came out of nowhere, or at least that's how it felt to me at the time. Marcus sat me down one evening and told me he needed space to find himself and that our relationship had run its course. I was devastated, completely blindsided by the whole thing. He moved out within a week, taking most of the furniture we'd bought together, furniture I'd paid for, naturally. For months afterward, I was a wreck, crying myself to sleep and stalking his social media like it was my full-time job. My friends staged an intervention, took away my phone on weekends, and forced me to actually start living again. Slowly, painfully, I began to heal and move on with my life. Fast forward 18 months after our breakup, and I'm in a much better place. I've been promoted at work, started dating again, and genuinely felt like I'd left Marcus in the past where he belonged. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I deleted but still recognized instantly. My stomach dropped as I opened it and read the words that would change everything. "Hey Sarah, hope you're well. I'm getting married in 3 months, and since you benefited so much from our relationship, I think it's only fair you contribute $10,000 toward the wedding expenses." I had to read it 3 times, because surely this couldn't be real. But wait, it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. The message continued, explaining that since I had used him for emotional support during our relationship and he had sacrificed his prime years being with me, I owed him this money. He actually itemized things: dinners he'd paid for, a weekend trip he'd covered when I was between paychecks, birthday gifts he'd bought me. The math was creative, to say the least, and somehow added up to me owing him exactly the amount he needed for his wedding venue. The sheer audacity of this man, who'd lived in my apartment rent-free for 2 years and whose business I'd bankrolled with $15,000 of my own money, was absolutely breathtaking. Now, a smarter person might have just blocked the number and forgotten about it, but I've never claimed to be smart when it comes to satisfying my curiosity, and something about this whole situation felt off. So I did what any self-respecting woman in the digital age would do. I started investigating. A quick Instagram search led me to his fiancée, a woman named Jessica, who looked sweet and kind and absolutely clueless about who she was marrying. Her profile was public, full of excited posts about wedding planning, gushing captions about her amazing man, and countdown posts to their big day. My heart actually hurt for her because I remembered being that naive, that blindly in love, that convinced I'd found my person. As I scrolled through Jessica's posts, something caught my eye. In one of her stories from 3 months ago, she'd posted a photo of herself and Marcus with the caption, "2 years together and he finally proposed." 2 years together. I pulled out my old calendar and started counting back from our breakup. We'd broken up 24 months ago, which meant, oh my God, he'd been dating Jessica while we were still together. That finding himself speech, the sudden need for space, the weird behavior in those last few months of our relationship, it all clicked into place like the world's worst puzzle. This man had overlapped relationships, gotten engaged after cheating on me, and now had the nerve to demand I fund his wedding to the woman he'd left me for. A plan started forming in my mind. beautiful and terrible in equal measure. I could just ignore him, sure, but where was the justice in that? Where was the karma? Marcus had spent 4 years using me as his personal bank while building a life with someone else, and now he wanted one final withdrawal. Now, ignoring him wasn't enough. I needed him to face consequences, real consequences, for once in his entitled life. More importantly, Jessica deserved to know exactly who she was about to marry. I wasn't doing this just for revenge. Okay, maybe it was like 70% revenge, but I genuinely believed this woman had a right to know the truth before legally binding herself to a con artist. Over the next week, I became a detective. I dug through old emails, bank statements, and text messages, compiling a complete financial history of my relationship with Marcus. Venmo transactions for his business supplies, rent I'd paid while he lived with me, the car loan documents, receipts for furniture and electronics, everything. I also went through my Google Photos and found time-stamped pictures of us together that overlapped with his 2-year anniversary with Jessica. Screenshots of text messages where he told me he loved me during the time he was apparently already with her. Credit card statements showing I'd paid for a romantic Valentine's Day dinner the same year he'd been dating Jessica. The evidence was damning, a complete timeline of lies and manipulation. Then came the hardest part, figuring out how to contact Jessica. I didn't want to seem like a crazy ex-girlfriend or someone trying to sabotage their happiness out of jealousy. After drafting and deleting about 50 messages, I finally settled on something simple and honest. I sent her a direct message introducing myself, explaining that Marcus had contacted me asking for money, and that in looking into why he thought he could ask such a thing, I'd discovered some information she deserved to know before the wedding. I told her I had proof of everything I was claiming, and that I'd understand if she didn't believe me or didn't want to hear it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, and then waited, my heart pounding like I just ran a marathon. Jessica responded within 3 hours, and her message was cautious but curious. She said Marcus had mentioned me as a crazy ex who wouldn't leave him alone, and that she was skeptical of anything I had to say. But something in my message must have resonated, because she agreed to meet me for coffee the following Saturday, in a public place with a friend waiting nearby in case I turned out to be a psycho. I couldn't blame her for being careful. If someone had contacted me 3 years ago with claims about Marcus, I probably wouldn't have believed them either. We set a time and place, and I spent the next few days organizing all my evidence into a clear, chronological folder that told the story without me having to say much at all. That Saturday, I arrived at the coffee shop 30 minutes early, nervous in a way I hadn't been since my first day at my current job. Jessica walked in right on time, looking pretty and put together, but with worry lines creasing her forehead. We exchanged awkward hellos, ordered drinks neither of us would actually finish, and sat down at a corner table. I slid the folder across to her and told her to take her time, that I'd answer any questions she had. She opened it hesitantly, and I watched her face transform as she went through page after page, confusion giving way to shock, shock morphing into anger, anger settling into a cold, hard determination that I recognized from my own mirror. The bank statements hit her first, showing thousands of dollars I'd transferred to Marcus for his business ventures. Then came the lease agreement, showing he'd lived with me rent-free, time-stamped photos of us together during the period he'd told her he was single and healing from a toxic relationship. Text messages where he'd said, "I love you" to me mere weeks before his supposed first date with her. The car loan documents proving I was still financially tied to him. For over an hour, Jessica sat there reading, occasionally asking for clarification, her coffee growing cold and forgotten beside her. When she finally looked up, tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. "He told me you were obsessed with him and wouldn't let me move on," she said quietly. "He made you sound unhinged." What happened next was unexpected, but somehow healing. Jessica and I started talking, really talking, and discovered that Marcus had run the same playbook on both of us. She'd helped him pay off debt that I now realized was probably from his failed business that I'd funded. He'd borrowed money from her for emergency car repairs on the car I'd co-signed for. She'd been paying for most of their dates because he was saving for their future, a future he was now demanding I help finance. We sat there for 3 hours, comparing notes, finding pattern after pattern of manipulation and financial abuse. By the end, we weren't two women fighting over a man, we were two survivors recognizing each other's scars. As the coffee shop started preparing to close, Jessica looked at me with something fierce burning in her eyes. "He asked you for $10,000 for our wedding," she said slowly. "What if we gave him exactly what he deserves instead?" I felt a smile spreading across my face that probably looked slightly unhinged. We exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch, and over the next 2 weeks, we hatched a plan that was absolutely petty, completely justified, and deeply satisfying. Jessica didn't call off the wedding immediately because she wanted Marcus to feel secure, unsuspecting, right up until the moment his world came crashing down. She was a much better actor than I would have been because I would have confronted him immediately. Meanwhile, I responded to Marcus's message with an Oscar-worthy performance of my own. I told him I'd thought about his request, and while I couldn't give him $10,000, I could contribute $5,000 as a gesture of goodwill and closure. I said I wanted to move on positively and that helping him start his married life felt like the right thing to do. His response was immediate and exactly what I expected. Gracious acceptance without a hint of shame or acknowledgement of how absurd his request had been. He gave me the wedding date and venue information, told me I could Venmo the money a week before, and actually had the audacity to thank me for finally being mature about everything. Every word of his message made my blood boil, but I kept my cool because the payoff would be worth it. The week before the wedding, Jessica told Marcus she needed to add a few last-minute guests to the list, me included. She said I was a family friend who'd recently come back into her life and that it would mean a lot to have me there. Marcus, apparently so confident in his lies that he'd never connected the dots, agreed without suspicion. Jessica and I texted constantly, fine-tuning every detail of our plan. She'd confronted him about nothing, given him no hints that she knew the truth. She went to her final dress fitting, confirmed catering numbers, played the excited bride perfectly. I watched her transformation from devastated fiancé to calculated planner with something close to awe. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, like the universe itself was setting the stage for drama. I wore a simple navy dress and arrived at the venue with my heart hammering in my chest. The place was beautiful, an elegant garden venue with white chairs and flowers everywhere, probably costing exactly the $10,000 Marcus had demanded from me. Guests milled around, completely unaware of the bomb about to detonate. Marcus stood at the altar looking smug and handsome in his tuxedo, checking his watch occasionally as the start time approached. I took a seat in the back, pulled out my phone to record, not for social media, just for personal satisfaction, and waited. The music started, and everyone stood as Jessica appeared at the end of the aisle. She looked absolutely stunning in her wedding dress, every inch the beautiful bride. Marcus's face lit up when he saw her, probably calculating how much money he'd successfully scammed from both of us to make this day happen. Jessica walked down the aisle slowly, her face unreadable, carrying a folder instead of a bouquet. The officiant looked confused, Marcus looked puzzled, and the guests started whispering. When Jessica reached the altar, she didn't take Marcus's hand. Instead, she turned to face the assembled crowd and said in a clear, calm voice, "Before we begin, there's something everyone should know about the man I was supposed to marry today." You could have heard a pin drop in that garden. Marcus's face went from confused to pale to red in about 3 seconds. "Jessica, what are you doing?" he hissed, but she ignored him completely. She opened the folder and began reading, her voice never wavering. She detailed how Marcus had been dating both of us simultaneously, how he'd financially manipulated me for years before doing the same to her. She showed bank statements on her phone that she'd projected onto a screen the venue used for slideshows. We'd arranged that in advance. Photos of Marcus and me together during his supposed single period appeared larger than life. Text messages where he'd professed love to both of us on the same days. The crowd gasped, some people pulled out their phones, and Marcus's mother actually screamed, "Marcus Anthony Williams, what have you done?" Marcus tried to grab the microphone, sputtering excuses and calling Jessica crazy, but his own father held him back. "Let her finish, son," his dad said in a tone that could freeze fire. Jessica continued, explaining how Marcus had asked me for $10,000 to pay for this wedding, how he'd lied about being in debt while spending money on who knows what, how he'd presented himself as a victim to everyone in his life while victimizing the women who loved him. Then came the final twist. Jessica announced she'd canceled everything that morning, that there would be no wedding and that everyone should go home. "But please," she added with a smile, "enjoy the appetizers in the reception hall that Marcus has already paid for. Consider it his apology for wasting your time." Chaos erupted. Marcus's family descended on him with fury I'd never seen outside of movies. His mother was crying, his father was yelling, his sister was literally screaming about how embarrassed she was. Jessica's family surrounded her with hugs and support, several of her friends shooting death glares at Marcus. I stayed in my seat, watching it all unfold like the world's most satisfying reality show. Several guests actually came up to Jessica for her bravery, and a few recognized me from the photos and offered their sympathies. Marcus tried to approach Jessica, then me, but his groomsmen, former friends who now looked at him with disgust, physically blocked him. He ended up leaving through a side exit, alone, his tuxedo jacket torn from where his father had grabbed him during their argument. After most guests had left, Jessica and I stood together in that empty garden venue, surrounded by the remnants of a wedding that never was. She'd changed out of her dress into jeans and a t-shirt, looking younger and somehow lighter than before. "Thank you," she said, squeezing my hand. "If you hadn't reached out, I would have married him. I would have spent years in the same cycle you went through." I squeezed back, feeling something between triumph and sadness. We'd both lost years to Marcus's manipulation, but at least we'd found each other in the wreckage. We promised to stay friends, to support each other, and to never let another man treat us as anything less than we deserved. But the revenge didn't end there, because Jessica and I weren't done with Marcus yet. Together, we filed a civil suit against him for the money he'd essentially stolen from both of us through manipulation and fraud. We compiled every receipt, every bank statement, every text message where he'd promised to pay us back soon. My lawyer said we had a solid case given the paper trail and the pattern of behavior. Marcus tried to countersue for defamation, but his lawyer apparently took one look at our evidence and dropped him as a client. The legal battle took 8 months, but eventually we won a judgment requiring Marcus to repay both of us, me for the business investment and car loan, Jessica for various loans and shared expenses he'd never contributed to fairly. Getting a judgment and getting actual money are two different things, as we quickly learned. Marcus claimed poverty, said his business had failed and he had nothing to give us. But Jessica had stayed friendly with his sister, who informed us that Marcus had recently purchased a new truck and was planning a trip to Europe. We reported this to our lawyer, who initiated proceedings to garnish his wages and put liens on his property. Slowly, painfully slowly, money started coming in. $50 here, $100 there. It wasn't the dramatic flood of justice we'd hoped for, but watching him struggle to maintain his lifestyle while paying us back brought its own satisfaction. His social media went from constant posts about success and travel to radio silence, a digital ghost town. What surprised me most was how our story spread beyond just our immediate circles. Jessica had posted about what happened, no names mentioned, but detailed enough that anyone who'd been at the wedding knew exactly who she was talking about. Other women started reaching out to both of us, sharing their own stories of financial manipulation in relationships. Some of Marcus's ex-girlfriends contacted us, confirming that he'd run similar schemes on them for smaller amounts. It became clear that Marcus wasn't just a bad boyfriend, he was essentially a con artist who specialized in romantic relationships. We considered going to the police, but our lawyer said the cases were too old, and proving criminal fraud versus civil fraud would be nearly impossible without more concrete evidence of intent. In the months following the wedding that never was, I started therapy to work through what I'd experienced. My therapist helped me see patterns I'd missed, how I'd ignored red flags because I was so invested in the idea of us, how I'd confused financial support with love, how I'd let Marcus's narrative about me being difficult or demanding shape my self-perception. It wasn't easy work, looking at how I'd enabled my own manipulation, but it was necessary. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize when someone was taking advantage of my generous nature, to understand that real love doesn't come with an invoice or an expectation of repayment. I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away, even when you've invested everything. Jessica went through her own transformation, selling her wedding dress online and using the money to take herself on a solo trip to Italy. She started a blog about financial abuse in relationships that went viral, connecting with thousands of women who'd experienced similar situations. She became an advocate, speaking at events about recognizing manipulation and protecting yourself financially in relationships. We stayed close friends, texting almost daily, meeting up for dinners where we'd laugh about how we'd accidentally become feminist heroes for exposing one terrible man. She started dating again eventually, but with a newfound wariness and standards that wouldn't budge for anyone. "If a man ever asks me to pay his bills again," she joked once, "I'm reporting him to the FBI." About a year after the wedding that never was, I got one final message from Marcus. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just, "I hope you're happy now that you've ruined my life." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling nothing but pity. This man genuinely believed he was the victim, that two women comparing notes and exposing his lies constituted some kind of conspiracy against him. He'd learned nothing, grown not at all, and would probably continue trying the same schemes on new, unsuspecting women. I thought about responding with all the things I'd wanted to say for years, about his selfishness, his manipulation, his complete lack of integrity. Instead, I screenshotted the message, sent it to Jessica with a laughing emoji, and blocked his number for the final time. Some people don't deserve your words, your energy, or your anger. They deserve your absence. Looking back on the whole experience now, I'm grateful it happened the way it did. Not for the pain, I could have done without 4 years of financial and emotional manipulation, but for what came after. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be about destruction. Sometimes it's about revelation and truth. I learned that the most powerful thing you can do is give someone information and let them make their own choices. Jessica chose herself, chose honesty, chose dignity over a false fairy tale. I learned that supporting other women, even when they're initially competition, creates something stronger than any romance. Jessica and I joke that Marcus gave us the greatest gift, each other's friendship, and the unshakable knowledge that we're smarter, stronger, and better than anyone who tries to use us. If there's anything I want people to take away from this story, it's this. Pay attention to financial patterns in your relationships. If you're always paying, always covering expenses, always hearing excuses about money problems that never quite resolve, those are red flags bigger than any relationship red flag articles talk about. Love shouldn't cost you your savings account, your credit score, or your peace of mind. If someone truly loves you, they'll want to contribute equally to your shared life, not drain your resources while offering empty promises. And if you find yourself in a situation like mine, where you've realized you've been used and manipulated, know that it's never too late to speak your truth. Connect with others who've experienced similar things, compile your evidence, and don't let shame or embarrassment keep you silent. These days, I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who insisted on splitting our first date check and who actually argues with me about who gets to pay for things because he wants to contribute. He knows the full story about Marcus, and his response was to help me review my credit report and make sure there were no surprises lurking there. Jessica is engaged again, to a woman this time, someone she met at one of her speaking events about financial abuse. "Turns out I needed to stop dating men," she texted me when she announced her engagement, and I've never seen her happier. We're both in each other's weddings, for real this time, with no drama planned because there won't be any needed. As for Marcus, last I heard through the grapevine, he's dating someone new and trying to start yet another business venture. His sister, who Jessica still talks to occasionally, says he's told everyone in his life a version of events where Jessica and I were vindictive exes who conspired to ruin his wedding out of jealousy. He's apparently the victim in his narrative, the good guy who just wanted to start fresh but was dragged down by bitter women from his past. It would be infuriating if it wasn't so predictable. But here's the thing. His sister also mentioned that his new girlfriend has been asking questions, doing research, and recently reached out to Jessica. The cycle might be breaking after all, not because Marcus changed, but because his victims are now warning each other. This whole experience taught me that revenge isn't always about making someone suffer. Sometimes it's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else the same way. By exposing Marcus, by sharing our stories publicly, by warning his new girlfriend, Jessica and I created a network of information that protects potential future victims. We turned our pain into purpose, our anger into action. That's more valuable than any amount of money Marcus could have paid back, more satisfying than seeing him publicly humiliated at his almost wedding. We took our power back not by destroying him, he did that to himself, but by refusing to be silent about what happened. We chose truth over keeping the peace, and that choice rippled out further than we ever expected. So when my ex demanded I pay for his wedding, I gave him something much more valuable than $10,000. I gave his fiancée the truth, and together we gave him consequences. Was it revenge? Absolutely. Was it justified? I believe so. Was it worth the risk of looking like the crazy ex he'd painted me as? 100% yes. Because at the end of the day, women supporting women, sharing information and refusing to be scammed in silence, that's more powerful than any man's manipulation. Marcus thought he could use me one more time, squeeze one more payment out of the woman he'd already bled dry. Instead, he lost everything: his wedding, his reputation, his ability to easily manipulate others without consequence. And me? I gained a lifelong friend, a stronger sense of self-worth, and the deep satisfaction of knowing I helped someone escape the trap I fell into. That's the kind of investment that actually pays dividends. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. I know it's messy and petty and probably not the kind of graceful, forgiving ending people expect from these stories. But life isn't a romantic comedy where the heroine just walks away with her head held high and karma magically handles everything. Sometimes you have to be your own karma. Sometimes you have to fight for justice because no one else will hand it to you. Sometimes the high road is actually standing your ground and making sure the truth is heard, even when it's uncomfortable and complicated. I don't regret a single thing I did, and I'd do it all again if faced with the same situation. Because staying silent might have been easier, but it wouldn't have been right. And I'd rather be the crazy ex who exposed a con artist than the quiet victim who let him keep winning. To anyone out there dealing with a manipulative ex, a partner who's using you financially, or a situation where you know speaking up will make you look bad, speak up anyway. Document everything, trust your gut, and don't let anyone make you doubt your reality. To Marcus, if by some chance you're hearing this, I hope you've learned something from all of this, though I doubt you have. And to Jessica, my unexpected sister-in-arms who turned the worst day of her life into a moment of powerful truth. Thank you for being brave enough to listen to a stranger's message, strong enough to face the truth, and bold enough to blow up your own wedding rather than live a lie. You're the real hero of this story. The rest of us just got to watch you save yourself. And honestly, that's the best ending I could have ever hoped for.